Every population of animal has a specific role in its ecosystem. They consume resources, interact with other organisms, and change their environment. Although this cartoon is somewhat of an exaggeration, it demonstrates some of these ideas. Beavers use resources such as the food they consume, the oxygen they breathe, and the wood they use to build dams. One of the beavers, Bucky, has concrete which would prevent leaks in the dam. Bucky has a unique and important role within his population, just like beavers have a specific and important role in their ecosystem. This is called a niche. The one specific environment or habitat we saw Bucky and his friends living in are not the only conditions that beavers can live. They have a high tolerance for temperature and a narrower range for the tolerance of precipitation. Beavers live all the way from northern Canada to as far south as Texas. However, because of the extremely wet conditions of Florida and the extremely dry conditions of the desert Southwest, these are about the only places north of Mexico that beavers don't live. A beaver ended up in a place outside their range of tolerance, someplace that was too wet or too dry or too hot. They would experience stress trying to maintain homeostasis or stability inside their bodies. Since beavers build dams to live in, they may have to travel too far in the desert Southwest in search of water. Because of their thick fur, beavers would have to expend a lot of energy getting rid of that excess body heat, so they don't generally live further south in Texas. The graph on the bottom of the page shows a generic graph that demonstrates tolerance. Along the bottom of the graph is some environmental variable. It might be temperature, precipitation, elevation, or the presence of a particular nutrient. Along the y-axis is the percentage of the population that lives in those particular conditions. Almost none of the population lives in the very high or very low end of this range because it would cause them stress. The tolerance of a plant or animal is part of their niche. A niche is basically a way of life. It's a description that could include a lot of information, like their tolerance of a lot of different environmental factors, how it gets what it needs to eat, live, and reproduce. For example, within the tree on the right, each one of these birds occupies a specific niche. The Cape May warbler lives near the top of the spruce tree. The ray-breasted warbler lives in the middle of the tree, and the yellow-rumped warbler lives at the bottom branches of the tree. This is just one aspect of each of their niches. We could also talk about the way in which each interacts with other animals, that it eats worms or different types of insects. We could say in what temperature range the spruce tree grows. Niche is kind of a hard word to wrap your head around simply because its definition is so broad. But simply put, an organism niche is its way of life. Some aspects of a niche one species shares with another species. For example, deer, rabbits, and cows all eat grass. However, they don't share the same niche. Deer live in forests while cows usually live in open pastures. But because they all eat grass and grass is in limited supply, deer, rabbits, and cows all compete for grass. It's an advantage for them to eat several different types of food sources in order to minimize the competition for food. Some animals deal with this competition for food by fighting, being active at different times of day, or traveling in groups. However, too much competition can make obtaining resources a real struggle and life very stressful. Therefore, the competitive exclusion principle says that no two species can occupy the same niche in the same habitat at the same time. This is because they would need to compete for every resource and expend a lot of energy just to get the things they need to survive. Competition is one factor within ecosystems that keeps one organism from wiping out the others. This competition can be between members of different species. Coyotes have been known to hunt wolves or bobcats because they compete for the same food source, small mammals. Or it could be between members of the same species, like looking for mates. Members of the same species could also compete for food resources. In competing for resources, organisms must interact and form relationships between species. And when I say relationships, I don't mean exactly in the way you think. An ecological relationship is simply an interaction that usually happens repeatedly over a period of time. Predation is the type of relationship where a carnivore hunts and kills another animal. The animal that hunts is called the predator, and the one that gets hunted is the prey. A similar type of relationship occurs between herbivores and the plants that they eat. This relationship is called herbivory. In both predation and herbivory, there's a constant struggle between the predator and prey, herbivore and producer, to gain an upper hand. Predators adapt to better hunt their prey, and prey adapts to better escape from their predators. Plants have some really interesting ways to get herbivores to stop eating them. Some clover plants have two compounds stored in their cells that when put together form cyanide. So when an herbivore chomps down on their leaves, cyanide is formed and can kill the herbivore. Plants might look innocent and helpless, but they have quite a sneaky arsenal full of defensive strategies. All prey affect the predator population that hunt them, and all herbivores affect the primary producers that eat them. However, some species in an ecosystem can have more far-reaching effects. These species that have big effects on their ecosystems are called keystone species. All kinds of life live in tidal pools just off the coast. They contain species like sea stars, otters, aquatic plants, shellfish, and small fish. In one particular tidal pool, when a sea star was removed, nearly all of the other species disappeared. For this reason, the sea star would be considered a keystone species. Another example is hummingbirds. They pollinate many plants, and without them, plant species disappear from a habitat because they're unable to reproduce.